day for the U.S. Senate. That's Decision Day, as in the fate of President Bush's Supreme Court nominee, Clarence Thomas.
While some would say everyday life in the new Soviet Union is a gamble, we'll show you how some Muscovites are taking that concept quite literally.
And with the National League Baseball playoffs in full swing, we'll introduce you to a young person with perhaps the best seat in the house for all the action.
It's a fight to the finish, and both sides plan to do battle by phone today.
Calls will come from the White House. They'll come from political groups. They'll come from average Americans.
Those ringing telephones will target U.S. senators. Callers will be trying to win votes for or against Judge Clarence Thomas.
Those votes will confirm or deny Thomas a place on the U.S. Supreme Court. This day of decision comes after a war of words that shocked, angered, and saddened a nation.
President Bush is standing by his nominee, and polls show most Americans feel the same way. They believe Thomas has been telling the truth, and they want him to be a Supreme Court justice. President Bush says he's glad to know that.
But law professor Anita Hill is standing by her story. She made that clear yesterday during a brief news conference. Hill claims Thomas made her a target of sexual harassment. She says it happened in the early 1980s when she worked for Thomas in Washington.
Hill's claims and the Senate hearings about them had Americans glued to their TV sets all weekend.
CNN's Bob Franken has today's top story.
Leave it to one of the most compelling figures to capture the essence of the weekend.
Central Casting couldn't have done a better job. I had some people say to me, you couldn't make a movie as good as this really was.
A sordid movie about politics and allegations about a Supreme Court nominee.
He talked about pornographic material. On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess.
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks.
Pro-Clarence Thomas forces in the Senate were continuing their effort to discredit Anita Hill right to the end. They released an affidavit from a partner in the law firm she left to join Clarence Thomas. John L. Burke swore that in the spring of 1981 he told her it would be in her best interest to consider seeking employment elsewhere. And the pro-Thomas forces seem to be winning the public relations war. A CNN Gallup daily poll shows that when factoring the margin of error, the same majority continues to favor Clarence Thomas's confirmation to the Supreme Court. In the Senate, a CNN survey shows that enough Democrats who supported Thomas continue to do so, and that his confirmation should pass. Democrats like Bennett Johnston of Louisiana.
The calls are inundating the office, and they're about 4-1 for Judge Thomas.
But senators are very nervous about how they might antagonize woman voters, newly assertive about sexual harassment.
We are on the eve of a very important election year, and women will remember this vote.
Thomas supporters like Democratic Senator Dennis DeConcini will now have to deal with the charge that the men in the nearly all-male Senate don't understand sexual harassment, just don't get it.
We do get it, many of us, as much as a man can get it.
At the moment, it looks like Clarence Thomas will get his Senate confirmation to the Supreme Court, if there are no surprises. But given the mind-boggling events of the last week or so, all agree that's a big if. Bob Franken, CNN, Capitol Hill.
The Founding Fathers who wrote the U.S. Constitution designed a democracy. They drew up a plan to make sure power would be shared. Key to the plan is a system of checks and balances. There are checks or limits to guarantee a balance of power. We see that system at work in the Thomas confirmation process. The power of a president to choose a Supreme Court justice is checked or limited. With today's vote, President Bush must win the Senate's approval for his choice. But the fate of Judge Thomas has left many Americans wondering. At issue today, is it time to change the confirmation process? CNN's Deborah Potter reports.
It all happened on national TV, the charges and denials, the posturing and the probing. It was personal and political, and to some, it was too much.
Our country can't tolerate any longer no political agenda, however laudatory, justifies the destruction of a human being.
The Senate hearing was not a trial, so it was almost anything goes. Hearsay, vague recollections, even wild guesses about motives, all of it under oath.
We're hearing about schizophrenia. We're hearing about delusions. We're hearing about mental disturbances. And one has to just ask oneself is how far will the proponents for this nomination go in trying to attack Professor Hill?
There were cries of foul from the other side when it was learned that Hill had passed a lie detector test. Not admissible in court, but this was no courtroom.
So to throw that in the middle of a Supreme Court nomination as though it's real legitimate evidence is highly offensive. That's my only point. And highly political.
Even some of the witnesses chimed in to attack the process.
I think there was a better way for this whole thing to have been investigated and to have been handled. I think we did both of them a disservice by handling it the way we did.
The system did have its defenders who admitted it's not perfect.
To be completely blunt about it. It's like democracy. It's a lousy form of government, except no one's figured out another way.
The Constitution says that the Senate shall advise and consent. Well, this is the process of consenting. And I wouldn't want the FBI to make that judgment. I wouldn't want, certainly not the CIA to make it. The Constitution says the Senate makes it, and this is the process by which we do it.
Some say it's about time to find another way to at least make sure that secret information stays secret.
When you don't have compliance with these procedural rules, it polarizes the sides, it makes any compromise much more difficult, and it embitters the political process.
The fight over the Clarence Thomas nomination will soon be over, but the acrimony lingers, and the fight over how the Senate should handle the next confirmation case may not be settled for some time. Deborah Potter, CNN, Washington.
Last week, we profiled David Rail, a high school Spanish teacher from Bald Knob, Arkansas, whose work for the needy made him a candidate for the 1991 Nobel Peace Prize. Well, the Peace Prize winner was announced yesterday in Oslo, Norway, and Mr. Rail's name was not called. But this year's recipient is no less inspiring. She's from the remote Asian country of Myanmar, formerly called Burma. She leads the group opposing the current military government in Myanmar, and there's a good chance she does not know that she's won the Nobel Prize. Her name is Aung San Suu Kyi, and the military has had her under house arrest for 2 years. Suu Kyi is barred from receiving visitors or communicating with outsiders. She won the Nobel Prize for insisting on nonviolent means to bring democracy to her impoverished country. She and her group have so far been crushed by the ruling military. Myanmar, then called Burma, got its independence from Great Britain in 1948. In 1962, a military council seized power in a coup. The military controlled the country as a socialist state for more than 20 years. In April of 1988, Suu Kyi returned to Myanmar from her studies in Britain. In July of that year, a popular uprising forced the military government to resign. But the military seized power again in September, and Suu Kyi began campaigning for democracy. On July 20th, 1989, Suu Kyi was placed under house arrest. In May of 1990, her party, the National League for Democracy, won parliamentary elections. But the military refused to let the opposition party take power and continues its repressive rule. Well, decades of communist rule in the Soviet Union brought little prosperity to Soviet citizens. And with the country now trying to make the difficult transition to a market economy, Prosperity may be a long way away. Still, many Soviet citizens seem eager to risk the few rubles they have on games of chance. CNN's Tom Mintier reports.
This is a supermarket in downtown Moscow. After a full day's work, this is the place where people line up for milk, meat, and potatoes. You can also buy your shoes here if you're lucky enough to find some on the shelves. They don't sell fruit here, but there are plenty of cherries, plums, and oranges in one corner of the store. There is gambling in the Soviet Union, some of it found in unlikely spots like this grocery store. The slot machines are expensive. A month's salary can be fed into a slot machine in less than 5 minutes. Many of these people are feeding their hopes on slim chances.
How many times a week do you play?
I've been playing for a year and a half.
Every day?
Yes.
How much do you spend?
However much I have in my pocket, that's what I spend.
Just like any casino, the odds favor the house. You may win some rubles, but as you continue to play, you pay.
I started with 25 rubles, and now I've won and have 300 in my pocket.
This is the Casino Moscow, one of 4 licensed gambling houses in the city. The chandeliers are cut glass and high rollers fill the chairs every night. U.S. dollars flow freely here. Recorded American pop music is used to set the proper atmosphere. Manager Rudy Pulyuret says gambling has deep roots in Soviet history.
People have been gambling all their lives. If you read the stories about the Tsars and the whole stories, the Russian people always have been short gamblers, I think.
Many of these players work for joint venture companies. They are paid in U.S. dollars and allowed by the government to spend them. It is not uncommon for them to spend hundreds, if not thousands, on a single spin of the roulette wheel. There are winners here, but they almost always become losers.
Their mistake is they come back the next day and lose everything. I mean, that's the rule. It's always 50-50, or even 60-40, I would say.
The stakes are high, playing for dollars or rubles. Most people playing at the dollar casino can afford it. But for someone making 200 rubles a month and spending 2 on each pull of the slot handle, it may be food coming off the table. But for both players, the desire is the same. If you win, maybe your life will be just a little better. The same logic used in casinos in other parts of the world, usually with the same results. Tom Mintier, CNN, Moscow.
Well, that was just one of a string of missed opportunities for the Atlanta Braves yesterday. Now the Pittsburgh Pirates lead the National League Championship Series 3-2. And many of you may be following the series very closely and may be wishing you were there. Well, 16-year-old Chris Ellis of suburban Atlanta is there and has been all season long. By day, he's a regular high school student, but by night, he becomes an Atlanta Braves bat boy. And how does it feel to wear the uniform of a team that may be in the World Series?
It was dramatic, really. Just when we ran out on the field, I mean, I had always wanted to do that since I got the job.
Wow, so I have to ask you, do you have the tomahawk chop?
Oh, easy. Living here in Atlanta, you get this. This is like a natural motion. Talk about a great after-school job for him. That's wonderful. And tomorrow we'll have the story of another teenager who goes a little bit beyond the extracurricular after-school.
That's right. You know, she's a volunteer firefighter, so she's has a job.
A little bit more dangerous than being a bat boy, but we're not comparing.
I think so.
That's it for today. I'm Brian Todd.
And I'm Cassandra Henderson. We'll see you tomorrow. Come on.
CNN Newsroom is part of Cable in the Classroom, a service of the cable television industry and your local cable company.
Do you realize just how much difference there is in life insurance rates from one insurance company to the next? For instance, if you're in good health and don't smoke cigarettes, Garden State Life Insurance may be able to save you as much as 50% off the cost of your life insurance. That's right, 30, 40, 50% off what you'd have to pay for a comparable amount of coverage elsewhere. And not just this month, but year after year for the rest of your life. Savings like that are well worth looking into. So if you need $100,000 to $1 million or more of quality term life insurance, you owe it to yourself to get the facts fast by calling now, 800-257-1257, toll free for this free information package, including a personal coverage proposal that shows you just how much your savings might be. There's no obligation, no sales pressure, and it could be a real eye-opener. For instance, as your Garden State Life representative can tell you,
if you're a healthy 40-year-old who doesn't smoke cigarettes, you may qualify for $100,000 worth of quality term life insurance at rates so low they're less than 55 cents a day.
how do we do it? First, you save because we offer this life insurance at these low rates only to people who are in good health. That cuts our risk and your premiums. Then, because this quality term life insurance is sold in amounts of at least $100,000 or more, you get the advantage of volume discounts. And it's easy to do business with Garden State Life Insurance because you deal with us directly. You're always just a phone call away. So call today, 800-257-1257, toll free, 257-1257 for your free personal coverage proposal. No obligation, no pressure. Discover how this quality term life insurance could save you as much as 50% off your premiums every year for the rest of your life. 800-257-1257, toll free. Call Garden State Life Insurance for your free information today, 257-1257.